using the Let's Resin Pear Mould this week, and I'm going to create a multimedia piece primarily from Aqua cast. I'm going to concentrate on the lid for a minute, and I've got some cornflour, and I want to pack that little stem because I don't want that to be in my final piece. So I'm thinking if I can pack that with the cornflour, then the Aqua cast won't pour into it. Now, I've used cornflour before when I was making the geodes to create some space in the Aqua cast, so I know that this works. I'm just hoping that this will work. I'm pouring the cornflour in there, and I'm using my dotting tool and my silicone tool just to stuff that down, and I really want to pack that in. I want that to be as solid as possible and fill it up as smooth to the surface as I possibly can. After I used the stick for a little while, I used my finger just to smooth that into the top, and you can see I've got a little bit of the powder left, and I left it in there. I didn't want to try and tip that out in case I dislodged what I'd already put in there, but I wiped as much as I could off using a little bit of a wipe and figured that the rest would just melt into the Aqua cast. So now I'm going to go ahead and mix that up and fill that. I've mixed enough for my lid, and I'm going to add this water-based pigment from Temu. I'm using black. It's not going to come out black, and I don't need it to be. I want a grey, but I'm just using this as a base colour because I am going to paint this afterwards. So I want to make sure that this is mixed in thoroughly. I'm not looking for any kind of marbling. And then I'm going to pour it into the lid. And I'm going to pour it slowly and carefully on the sides or round the middle. I'm not pouring it directly on top of that cornflour. I'll top it up. Now this has quite a sharp lip, so I am going to need to make sure that I get under there with a stick and try and remove any bubbles. I don't want to be doing any squeezing or too much tapping. I don't want to dislodge that cornflour. So I started to use my dotting tool to scrape out the bubbles, and then realised I actually need to put a little bit more in there. Hasn't quite reached the surface, and this has mixed up pretty much the right amount that I needed. The lid and the base do have the amounts printed on them. It's very difficult to see, but the lid takes 3 ounces and the base will take 11 ounces. I had to convert that to grams so I could figure out how much powder that I would need. I'll list those figures in the box below in case anyone's interested and is going to be using this for themselves. So that'll be in the description box, and you'll find quite a lot of information in the box that might be useful to you. So I'm running the dotting tool just around the inside, and I can see the bubbles through the edge, and I'm trying to coax them out, but being aware that I don't want to be moving the base around too much because I don't want to dislodge any of that cornflour and have it melt into the Aqua cast. I'm also mixing up some for the base now, and I've put some more of the same pigment in. It doesn't matter if I don't get the colour completely correct. I am painting it, as I said. So I don't have to worry about this one. I can pour that in and squeeze the bottom to make sure that there won't be any bubbles. And I can tap this, and I'll finish pouring this in. I noticed that my pot had become a little bit distorted, probably from where it's been stored in the box. And the base here is not completely round. So once I've filled this up and made sure that there aren't any bubbles, I'm going to just prop something up against it so that it becomes a little bit more round. Make sure it stays in that round position. So I have to scrape the rest of my pot out to fill this up, and you can see once I manage to get that back into position by squeezing the sides, I get that nice and round. So I'll stand a couple of bottles there while it's drying and setting, and this is going to take just over an hour, so I'll be back then. Alright, these are now dry and set. I'm going to take them out of the mould. Let's hope this one's worked. So I'm going to demold this in real time. And oh, I can see that I've got a bubble there. That's obviously one that I missed. That's okay, I can fix that. And it has worked, although I do have slightly more of a dip than I wanted. But I am going to be covering this with something, and I can patch it. I've got to fill that hole anyway, so I can fill this. It's certainly going to be easier to fill it than it is to sand that stem down. So you can see the cornflour here on the surface. Again, that's not a problem. I am painting this, but if you wanted to leave this raw, then make sure that you cleaned that completely. But it worked. So I need to get the cornflour out of the lid. I can use something to dig that out, but cornflour melts with water, so I can always wash it out as well. Let's demold this, and there's a lot of bubbles down the bottom. I do find this, and I don't know whether it's anything to do with the pigment that I'm using or something, but this does seem to produce a lot of bubbles at the bottom of the mould. Again, I can fill those. So it's not too bad to demold this one. It's a little harder with Aqua than it is with resin, but once you roll it back, you can just keep rolling and it will pop off, and then you just twist the middle and you can take it out, and there you go. So I've got no bubbles around the top, it all just seems to be centered around the bottom. I will fill that. I mix up a paste of air dry clay and just smooth that in, let that dry really, and then I can sand that down. Again, that's a lot easier than sanding the Aqua. Right, I'm turning my mould back the right way. You don't want to leave them inside out for any longer than necessary, and I can clean those later. So here is my air dry clay. I just stick a little bit into a pot and mix it with water until it becomes a paste, and then I can use that to fill in the area, and this will dry along with the Aqua for a good 24 hours, and then I should be ready to sand that back and I can paint it. So I'll do the same on the base and fill those areas that were bubbles around the bottom, and then this will be smooth and ready to paint. Now I'm using some foam air dry clay, and I'm going to shape that into a button. I want it to be flat on the back and slightly curved on the front. It doesn't have to be completely round. I'm going to be using this palette knife and scalloping the edge just by pushing the edge of the blade into the side of the ball. I'm going to make it irregular because I'm not making a flower. This is a creature. And once I've managed to do all three, I need 3 of them, I'm going to set these on a piece of parchment paper and I'll place them in the sun. They'll take roughly 24 hours to dry, the same way as the Aqua pot does. Now I need to use some wire. I'm going to create some ears. I've cut off a piece that's roughly 3 inches long, and I'm going to create a spike which is going to embed in the lid. And then I want to form a sort of leaf shape or a rounded triangle on the top. So I'll keep moulding that. I'm using some round nose pliers and pushing against the actual plier to round the wire. This is armature wire that you use for moulding, and it's quite soft, so it's easily bent. And I'm roughly shaping it into, it looks like a number 4 at the moment, but I'm going to bring this round to the middle, and as you can see, it looks like a leaf or a triangle on top of a spike. Once I have that roughly the shape that I want, I'm going to cut off any excess, and then I'm going to cover this with UV clay. I'm going to use a little bit of Vaseline, a very small amount, and I'll put that on my finger and then rub that onto the fingers of my gloves. This means that the UV clay won't stick to the gloves. And this is the one I got. I got it from Temu. So if I can find the link for that, I will put it in the description box. I'm going to scoop some out, and it's really quite gloopy and very, very sticky. Once I've managed to scoop some out, I'm going to form a ball and wrap that around the wire. And I do want this to coat all the way around the wire, because again, once I've cured this, I am going to paint this. This becomes softer the warmer it gets from your fingers, so you do need to work fairly quickly. I don't want to make this too thick either, because it is UV clay, and you're going to want to, although it's transparent, you are going to want to cure it all the way through. So I've just added a little bit more, enough to wrap all the way around the outside of that wire, and I need it to go down the spike just a little bit, but I need to leave some of the spike uncovered because that's actually going to embed into the lid of the pot. I will drill some holes and glue that in. Once I have roughly the shape that I need, I'm going to use my UV lamp to cure this, and I'll hold it and keep rotating it round under the lamp. And because it's an ear, I'm going to need 2 of them. Well, now I'm ready to add some paint. I'm using a tester pot that I have, and I've put the spike or the ear in a peg just to hold it, and I'm going to paint over the top of the UV clay. Now I need to drill a hole in the top. I'm using my Dremel and I've already drilled 1 hole. I'm going to drill another one, and then I can insert the little pegs from the ears and glue those in with some B7000 glue. I'll just squirt that down into the holes and then put the ears back in. And now I'm going to use some more UV clay, and I'm going to wrap that around the bottom. So again, a little bit of Vaseline on my gloves, scoop out the clay, and then I will wrap that around the bottom of the pegs so that it covers any of the wire that might still be there, and I can blend it into the head a little bit more. It will help bond the ears in place and will just cover up that join at the bottom. And once that's been cured, I can paint that too. The foam clay pieces are dry now, and I'm ready to colour them. I'm using a black Sharpie, and I'm going to colour these all in black, and then I can add some white eyes using an acrylic paint marker. The ears are still wet, but I've put the lid on top because I need to mark out onto this front of the pot the stomach. So I'm going to grab a pencil and mark that out, and then I'll be able to paint that in with white afterwards. I'm going to use an acrylic paint, and I'll probably have to give it a couple of coats. While I'm waiting for the paint to dry, I'm going to give these little creatures, who are called soot sprites, a coating of some UV resin, and then I'm going to pop them under the lamp to cure, and then I can move on to painting the face. I've dipped the end of my paintbrush into some white acrylic paint, and I'm drawing 2 dots for the eyes, and then I'll let that dry. I'm going to use my pencil again to mark out the nose and the rest of the features of the face. He also has some markings on the stomach, so I'll draw those out first, and then I can go ahead and paint those in. So I'm going to speed this up again and put some more music on. I have another piece of foam air dry clay, and I'm going to try and make that into a leaf. I've left it to now because I need to shape this onto the head, otherwise it's not going to fit. So I'm roughly squashing it into a kind of leaf shape, and then I will see if that's the right fit for going between the ears. And then I can lay this down on the table. I'm going to cut a wedge into the bottom, and then I can pull those pieces apart and shape that into the back of the leaf just by rounding it with my fingers. And the same with this one. And that middle section I'm going to turn into a stalk that will sit straight up. So I'll just pinch that together and pull it upwards, and that becomes the stalk of the leaf. This little creature, he's known as a Totoro, and he's a forest spirit, and he wears a leaf for a hat sometimes. So that's what I'm making now. I'll fit that between the ears and give it a curl. Just putting some markings in now. Then I'm going to leave it to dry before I use an alcohol marker to colour it. I also made some tiny stars from the air dry foam clay, and I coloured those with a yellow alcohol marker. I gave the base and the lid several coats of acrylic varnish. I applied it with my fingers and left it to dry between each coat. Now I can use the B7000 to fix the little soot sprites onto the body. Because they're foam clay, they should be self-supporting, so I'm going to put some glue on the back and then attach them to the body, and they should stay in place without me having to hold them on with some painter's tape. And soot sprites like to chase little stars, so I'm going to add those as well. I'll put 2 on the front, and then I'll put the other one on the back, and I'll show you that in the pictures afterwards. I think he's stinking cute. He's going to sit on my desk, and he'll be useful because he's a pot. I hope you've liked this video. If you have, please give me a thumbs up, comment, share, and if you haven't subscribed, please do so. It's free. Don't forget to check the description box below, and please come back and see what I'm going to make next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.